So what I want to talk about is why law, which of your students might find law interesting, and why they would really like to do law at Otago. And I'm very conscious of the fact that there are 6 universities at which you can study law. And so what is it that's special about Otago? Law has been studied at Otago University for 149 years. It's our 150th anniversary of the faculty next year. So that's pretty special about our long tradition. And we've just done a sort of what we might call a marketing refresh. I guess I'm probably not using good technical marketing language. And we've come up with whatever that is, tagline or something, that study at Otago's unrivaled legal community. And that's what we're really about, is about community and excellent study. So I want to share a screen with you, and hopefully this will work. And I also want to start by talking about a story, which, as we know, law is about stories. So with a bit of luck, you think I was experienced at this because I've been doing it all year with teaching online. So what you see there is a group of people in their law graduation gear. And in December 2020, we were all gathered for the pre-graduation brunch. And you may recall that the graduation at Otago was cancelled that year because of a bomb threat at the town hall. And it felt like huge buckets of cold water had been poured over all these happy, excited people who were all dressed up and there with their whānau to celebrate getting their degrees. Within an hour, a group of law students had organised an alternative law graduation in Marama Hall.
Sorry, Shelley. Sorry, it's Karen here. Hey, in terms of the presentation, are you able to put it on the full view? Because it's on the presenter view, so it means it's quite small for us.
That's a bit hard for me.
Prajesh, would you like to advise Prajesh? He's our IT expert.
Yes. Slide control. Oh dear, this is way too hard for me. This is not what I do for my students. Sorry, people.
No, Shelley, if you end your show.
Yeah, hi, Prakash.
Yeah, if you hit end show at the top there.
End show? Yep,
that's
on
right.
that.
And if at the bottom, if you just click the right at the bottom there, next to comments, you see the
full screen thing.
The next, so not that one there, the two next to that one there. So not the one with the
four little dots.
Not the 4 one, not the book, but the other one, the last one.
The last one. That one.
That one there, yeah. Oh.
That better?
Oh, that's weird. If we click use slideshow on the top there, use slideshow.
Swap displays, that should change it.
Swap displays?
There we go. That's much better. Yep, much better.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, Shelley.
It's all right, my students have never complained. Anyway, so within an hour, this bunch of students had reached out to each other, and we all met in Marama Hall and did a virtual presentation of degrees. We sang Gari Alma Segatua. We had an address, a pretend graduation address by one of our professors. And the president of our students' organisation had hoovered up the food that was left over at the graduation brunch, and we were able to share a lot of kai with our graduates and their whānau. That's what Otago law is about. It's about a community, and it's about people with skills to get themselves organised and to organise each other and to connect with each other and do some really, really cool things. So that's what your 6th and 7th formers would end up being able to do if they came to do law at Otago. So that's a particular story that I think sums up all the things that we're aiming for our graduates. So backing up the bus a little bit and talking a little bit about law. What is law as a subject? I mean, we've all encountered law, I guess, in our lives. We've all encountered, many of us have encountered lawyers. Studying law is about essentially problem solving, and it's problem solving in a particular kind of way. And so what we teach students on their way to becoming lawyers is about how to break a problem into issues. What are the bits that make up that issue? And then assessing what is the nature of those issues. Some of the issues are not legal issues, but some of them are. And then working out how we might solve that particular problem with law. So somebody who's got a dispute with their neighbour, some of it might not be resolvable by law, but some of it might be. So the job of a lawyer is to work out what can, within your particular story, be solved by law. And then thinking about the different consequences. of each solution. Some solutions might be to go to mediation. Some solution might be just to go, I just need to move on. Some might be to go to litigation. Some might be to get somebody else in to facilitate some conversations. So it's considering consequences. Some solutions are better in some circumstances, some solutions better in others. So studying law is about advocating solutions, working out what the answer might be. What is the best outcome for your client? And if we take that up to sort of thinking about law as it binds all of us together, what is the best solution perhaps for the country as well, as we're thinking about what law should we have, how should law be? So studying law is really about people. All law is about people. I teach company law, and I've had some students say to me, I don't want to do company law because it's not about people. And the simple answer is actually everything about law comes back to being about people. So what do people need? What do they want? And how can we help within a particular framework of decision-making and resolving conflict in a way that doesn't resort to, you know, sort of one-on-one violence? So who's law for? Well, there's no one typical path for a student into a law degree. I often, when I talk to students, say, many of you who argue with your parents will say, you should be a lawyer because you're good at arguing. And there's a big element of truth in that. And what law is about is arguing, but in a constructive and particular way. So I wouldn't say any particular kind of subject that students need to be doing at high school. And we'll look at double degrees in a minute to see just how broad the sort of relationship between law and other subjects is. It really suits the curious, those who question, why is it like that? Why is it not like this? How could it be better? Law really is well designed for those who are curious. There's a definite advantage for students if they have strong communication skills. Law requires a lot of reading. I mean, I can't pretend otherwise. In a typical lecture, which could require, you know, reading a couple of thousand words of material, cases, statutes, government reports, etc. And most of our assessment is written in nature. The parts that aren't written are oral advocacy. And so people who have got good written skills and good oral skills do particularly well. But if you haven't got particularly strong oral skills, students find that those develop through doing and practice and hearing each other speak. But particularly that communication skills are really important. An ability to time manage and plan is necessary. It's not an easy degree, and I'm sure I can probably see Amber about to start nodding. It requires a lot of organisation and self-organisation, but you know, it's there she is nodding. It's definitely doable, and learning those time management skills is partly what we're about teaching. And people who do really well have high emotional intelligence. This is, as I said a moment ago, really a people business law. So the study of law is itself a people business. So what do law graduates do? Well, basically get great jobs. And I just went to MB figures that show you all this stuff. And 3 years after graduation, 63% are in employment, 26% overseas, 9% in further study, and that median salary is 67,000. I suspect that is creeping up because I certainly know that there's a bit of a shortage of lawyers at the moment, and there's a sort of a bit of competition out there and a bit of a recruitment on money. Around half work in what we would call practice, so in either transactional law, you know, helping people buy and sell businesses and houses, in family law, employment law, criminal law. And the other half will be engaged in things like working for the government, working for iwi, working in business, working as business advisors. And what I have on this next screen is just a selection of some of our recent graduates. Now, the last time I showed a screen like this, afterwards somebody said to me, oh, why wasn't my niece on there? As she laughed. So if your daughter, son, niece, next door neighbour, best friend are not there, I apologise. we have lots and lots of great graduates, but I just chose this random group, and these would all be people who've graduated within the last 5 years maximum, just to show you what they are doing. So there are people working in law firms. One there you see is working in Queenstown, somebody else working in Manukau, somebody working in Amsterdam, and somebody working in New York. There are people working for government departments and for other agencies like the Commerce Commission, people working in commerce, Hewlett Packard, and people working in consultancy. There's a couple at EY, both in the EY Tahi consultancy where George Mohi is. Maya is a tax consultant, former student of mine. So you will see that law takes you to lots and lots of places, not only transactional law that we would call it, or the practice of law in the kind of direct client contact kind of way, but in other ways in which law informs society and in which law and legal skills help people to do great and interesting work. Right, so that's sort of about whose law is good for, who it would appeal to, and where they might like to end up. And so thinking a little bit about law at Otago. So the first year is open entry. It's a paper called Laws 101. Anybody who wishes to can do it. It's a full year paper. There's 2 major exams at the end of the year. And it's broken into sort of 4, I don't want to use the word modules because that sounds as though they're quite sequential, because it's all a bit more interwoven than that. But there are 4 strong components. We talk about what law in the community, what lawyers are, what do they do, and start to introduce some of the sort of basic ethical and professional ideas about what being a lawyer is, about being honest and how one deals with people and respect and all those kind of basic important ideas. And then another important strand is what we describe as origins of government. How did our law and government come to be the way it is? And we often think in the law about 2 strands of law in Aotearoa, New Zealand. One we commonly refer to as Cook's law, the law that came from England to here, and Kupe's law, the law that was here existing at the time. And at the moment, we're on a sort of an exciting journey of thinking about how those 2 strands of law interact and work. And so studying law in the next 5 years is really an interesting time to be engaged in it, because it's partly this realization of what does it mean, the legal system of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and recognizing those 2 strands. So there was a lot of work going on in our teaching programs, particularly around that. The third bit is statutory interpretation, those statutes that some of you are probably vaguely familiar with, you know, the Education Act, I dare to say the Crimes Act, a whole lot of statutes that Parliament enacts. What do those words mean? And words are inherently ambiguous. And I often use with students, and I think it's helpful with any audience, this example. For those of you who've been to London, you'll remember, and those of you who haven't, you've probably seen it in movies and books, signs at the top that say dogs must be carried on the escalator. And when you first read that, you think, well, that's obvious. If I've got a dog, I need to pick it up and carry it. But if you think about it again, it's actually ambiguous. Does it mean that dogs must, i.e. to go down the escalator, you ought to have a dog with you? So what seems pretty obvious to start with, when you start to pick at the language and think more deeply about it, is actually always has some ambiguities around it. And so statutory interpretation is the technique within the law for dealing with that in a principled and organised way, about reading language and understanding what Parliament really meant. And then the other strand of law is developed by the courts in what are called cases, for obvious particular litigation between parties. And the law evolves out of those decisions that the courts make. So we spend quite a little bit of time learning about how to understand that. So Laws 101, a big and interesting paper. There are lectures every week and there are tutorials every week where people practice the skills that we are teaching, taught by an exciting team of 6 of my colleagues. Laws 101 can be credited towards virtually any other course of study at Otago. So if you decide as a student, oh, law's not really for me, that's not a wasted paper. We're particularly recommending at the moment that students consider doing Māori 102, Māori Society, or some paper from Te Tumu to sort of buttress that side of their knowledge. It's, you know, it's not a requirement, but it's a suggestion that would be a pretty good thing to think about. Ultimately, you have to do 6 papers from some other degree. Most students would do 5, the minimum you can do is 4, and many students do 6. So that's a matter of sort of crafting with course advisors a particular program for a particular student. Beyond first year, so anybody can do Laws 101. Entry to second year is competitive. So there are about, I say here roughly 550 to 600 doing first year. And then we take into our second year program between 250 and 260. And you know, these are not precise numbers. We're not funded in the way that medical studies are. So the number, so you know, if we end up with 257 people ending on a mark, and then you know, the cut mark is not quite so rigid. So we have a bit of, I don't want to say wriggle room, but the numbers vary a bit. So we go from, you know, say 600, 580, whatever, down to somewhere between 250 and 260. Normally required to get about a B+ in Laws 101. And the requirement is it must be a B- average in the best 4 other papers. Now, 93% roughly of our students, law students, take a second degree. Probably the most common is the BA, followed closely by the BCom. There's a lot, and then there are a large number of BSc students, Bachelor of Music, Bachelor of Performing Arts. In fact, one of the principal organisers of that event I told you about at the beginning, the Bachelor of Performing Arts. And I noticed at graduation on Saturday, there were a number of people with Bachelor of Applied Science as well with law. And that means that you can sort of take your law degree beyond law out into those things that interest you. So you might be interested in finance, you might be interested in chemistry or anatomy or music or theatre studies. And so you can do that together. Either that can be sort of something you do for interest, or just to, you know, take that great learning experience that university provides. And it may lead to the kind of law that you want to go to. So, I mean, I end up teaching a lot of LLB, BCom students because taxation and the other things I teach are primarily focused there, not exclusively, but I would teach a lot of, you know, BCom students who are also interested in business. So that double degree is the dominant. There are about 7% of people decide they'll do 4 years and do an LLB and be getting on with it, and they do really well as well. So what do Otago law students do? Well, one of the things we have is a bunch of really active student organisations. And I think everybody around the university would say which are the most active student organisations, and they'd probably almost say, or exclusively say, the Law Students Association. Most of our students come from outside Dunedin, so that means that they are participants in that Otago residential experience. And the student organisations support them, along with all the other University of Otago structures and processes in that journey. And so there's one large organisation called SOLS, which has been going for 80 or something years. And it is this sort of umbrella organisation to which all law students can join, and very many of them do. They do that range of sort of normal stuff you would expect to see student groups do: social events, wellness programs, mentoring programs, and they run those student competitions where people practice legal skills. They're also heavily involved in volunteering. There's a community law centre at Otago that many of our students work at. There's the Ngāi Māori Law Centre where a number of students also do voluntary work, and they're also involved in Relay for Life and such like. Te Rupu Whaipataki is celebrating its 30th anniversary next year, and it has similar academic and social occasions and events and connections for Māori students. About 16% of our students are Māori. And I went to Māori pre-grad on Friday, which was before grad on Saturday. And almost without exception, the number of students, Māori students who are graduating there said, I came from the far north, or I came from the east coast, and Te Rupu Whaipataki was my whānau. That was the place where I found my connections and my friends. And so Te Rupu Whaipataki is particularly vital and important organisation, as are the others. So we have another 4. A similar kind of function run by PILSA, Pacific Island Law Students Association. Again, this important connection for students, particularly students who are far away from home and from their communities. 2 more recent student organisations, the Asian Law Students, founded in 2019. PILSA, PILSA, PILO, I should say, that's a mistake there, PILO, Pride in Law Otago, which is for students in the rainbow community, and they're doing an awful lot of interesting work and engaging with lawyers in the rainbow community about career development and such like. And then there's a more sort of broader group who are involved in what they call Law for Change. We have a new group just sort of embryonic starting called DILO, so we've got PILO and DILO, which is for disabled students in law, and it's just getting going in the last couple of months, and they're working to do similar sorts of things for their community as they identify that community. So what are Otago law's points of difference? And I think, as I said to you at the beginning, you can do law at 6 universities throughout New Zealand. What is different and special about us? And it is a sense of community. We have a smaller student cohort than many of the others, and we work hard to connect that group. On Saturday, one of the graduation addresses was given by Sir Ian Taylor, and he said he had told his team that he did not want to hear the word COVID and challenge in the same sentence. So I'm going to take that on board as well. COVID has enabled us to think differently and be innovative in how we connect students. We haven't been able to do many of the things that we used to do, and particularly organised by SOLS and PILSA and PILO and OELSA. There have been lots of virtual events and small events rather than the big connections, but we still are able to do the same things somewhat differently. And then academically, the thing that is completely different about law at Otago from any of the other 5, our second year law program is taught via immersion. There are 4 papers that you have to do, and you have to do them in that year. So you do criminal law, public law, property law, and contract law. Now, those 4 spread the sort of general panoply of what law does. I mean, law is about, it's private law, about people making contracts with each other, about owning property and selling property and sharing property and such like. About the criminal law, which obviously affects many people, and whether you're whichever side of the ledger you're on, and public law, about how government works, how our constitution works. So that's really, it's not all of law, but it's a very broad spectrum of what law is about. And so will you do those 4 papers, only those 4 papers, nothing else. And the whole program is designed as immersion into legal thinking and method and methodology, while engaging in subject knowledge across a pretty broad range. So that second year program is where you learn to think like a lawyer. It's unique to Otago. And this is not saying that you don't end up thinking like a lawyer when you come out with an Auckland degree, but you do it in a different way at Otago. And we've revisited this about 3 years ago and are totally committed to this immersion way. A, it helps us create this community, and B, it helps us get students with their skills early on. Beyond that, there's a choice of subjects that you can study. We have a very broad range. I mean, you can do taxation with me, a new paper next year called Law and Language, international law, environmental law, commercial law, family property, Bill of Rights, and some of those people that you will see familiar from the media, like Andrew Geddes, teaches about the kind of things that you'll hear him talking about on national radio. Jacinta Ruru talks about the things that you'll hear her talking about on national radio. So we have a whole broad range beyond that sort of core that we immerse them in to begin with. We have a very strong and respected degree recognition that's been going for 150 years. We have students all around the world, as you saw in that little snippet I gave you. The Dean of Law at Oxford is an Otago graduate, one of the leading jurisprudential legal thinkers. He's based in New York, and the world is an Otago graduate. So Otago graduates take their Otago law degree and do great things in this country, but great things around the world. And it leverages into and off, I suppose, what is their special Otago thing is this residential learning community. And I have a suspicion that that might be my last, and it is. So I can stop the share, and I have no idea how time went. I haven't heard the bell yet, so I kind of gone too far over time.
No, you did great, Shelley. We've got one question in the chat, and
Yep.
Thanks so much. I also saw some of my friends in the slides you put, George Moore being one of them. So we have one question here about the slideshow percentages related to graduate outcomes. Are half of those employed practicing law, or is that percentage half of all graduates going into the workforce? I think I'm interpreting that right.
So half of law graduates are in the practice of law in its broadest sense. I mean, this is a pretty rough statistic, but half are in the practice of law. They might work for, A and B solicitors. The other half are working for the Commerce Commission, the Ministry of Justice, Telecom, ANZ Bank, blah, blah, an iwi authority, whatever. So I hope that sort of explains it. Doesn't mean that those who are working at a bank or working at the Commerce Commission aren't doing law, but they're not doing what we would traditionally call the practice of law, the lawyer you go to see if you want to buy a house, or the lawyer you want to go to see if you're separated from your partner or something.
And there's so many skills, as someone not biased that just had a really great experience that came through, so many skills you learn practicing that law degree that are transferable to so many industries as well.
Yeah, which we can see by what you're doing. Yeah, a poster child for us.
Oh, well.
I'll put you up next year on my little.
Oh, I would love that. There we go. That's my goal. Thank you so much, Shelley. Are there any other questions? We have maybe 1 or 2 minutes very quickly if there is another question. Otherwise, we will need to move on to our next speaker. Shelley, if any other questions do come through, we'll get in touch afterwards.
Yeah, click them through, and if anybody wishes to, we have our own little visits to schools program. So if any of the people out there would particularly like to see us or engage with me or one of our staff, then feel free to get in touch at law@otago.ac.nz, and we can further talk about that. Some of you will see us out and about over the next few months. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for all the screens being on. That was really cool.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shelley. And if we can do a bit of a wave or round of applause for Shelley.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, so up next we have Associate Professor Marcelle Dawson, who is the Head of Program for Sociology, Gender Studies and Criminology. So she is here to present to us. And something that in my research I saw that she's done a lot of research in social transformation with a particular interest in alternatives to capitalism. So really excited for your kōrero here today, Marcelle.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Amber. Tēnā koutou katoa. It's lovely to see some familiar faces. Prajesh, I think we've seen each other over the years, so lovely to see you there. Thanks so much for this opportunity to speak to all of you about the value of our degrees for the future employment of our young people. So as you will have heard Amber say, my department covers 3 areas. So that's sociology, gender studies, and criminology. Now, before I talk about each of these wings of our department, I thought I'd begin with some of the key questions that we get from students and also sometimes from their parents. And one of the most obvious things, and I think probably relevant to this discussion today, is what kind of work will I end up doing with a degree in sociology, gender studies, and criminology? And I often say to students that, it's not one of those sort of direct pathways. When you come to Otago and you study dentistry, you've probably got a pretty fixed idea in your mind of what you want to do as a career. And it's not really the case with our degrees in sociology, gender studies, and criminology. But as Shelley spoke about just before, it really is about transferable skills. So for us, I think those 3 areas work quite well on their own, but they're even better when you combine them. So sociology, gender studies, and criminology, and they work really well in employment that is focused on social justice, social equality, and the overall betterment of society. So I often say to students, if you want to make Aotearoa a better place to live in, and if you want to make the world a better place to be in, then definitely take sociology, gender studies, and criminology. One of the other questions that often comes up from our prospective students or our school leavers is what kind of subjects can we take in your department? Now, I'm not really going to have time in this presentation to go into each of the papers that we teach, but that information is available on, in the curriculum guides and on the website. So there's a lot of papers that we teach from first year all the way through to postgraduate. But many of our students choose to major either in sociology or in gender studies, and it's even possible to do a double major in those 2 subjects. We also have students who simultaneously pursue a minor in criminology. And then when we tell students that, they sort of worry that they're going to get locked in. So they don't want to, only work in our department. So often the follow-up question will be, can I do other things on campus? And a major advantage of pursuing an Otago arts degree is that you can choose from a wide range of courses within and beyond the Humanities division. So we offer a lot of flexibility in terms of how students put their degrees together. So even if they take majors and minors with us, they're not locked into a rigid curriculum in our department only. So many of our students take psychology, politics, anthropology, languages, and even sport-related subjects. Because if you think about it, looking at society through the lens of sport can tell us quite a lot about equality and justice. So some of our students, have an interest in transgender athletes. They look at inequities in women's sport. And as Shelley was saying earlier, the law students often take our criminology paper. So many of you, I see Amber nodding again, so it might be, that in your law degree, you take Soci 103. So that's a first year introductory paper, and it pairs really well with a law degree. So if you're taking a degree in sociology, gender studies, and criminology, it really does open up a world of opportunities across campus. We've also got students who do health sciences, and many of them have to do a paper outside of health sciences, and a lot of them end up taking papers in sociology and gender studies, and it gives them that sort of balance. So they're not only working in health and medicine, but they get to understand people, because a disease doesn't just come into a doctor's room on its own. It comes in on a person, and that person is embedded in a community. And so to be able to understand the community, I think, is really important for our health science students. So now I want to move on and talk about each of the 3 broad disciplines and where those areas can take young people in terms of employment. I'll begin with criminology. So we offer that only at this stage as a minor at Otago. As a subject, it gives us insights into the social factors that shape criminal behavior. So instead of focusing on the individual who has committed a crime and examining their unique psychological features, we would rather focus on the complex social circumstances that shape people's lives. So we might look, for instance, at educational opportunities or family circumstances, or where people live, where they can afford to live. And we ask questions about their life chances. So what kinds of choices do people have? What kinds of opportunities have they had in life? And then we try to arrive at reasonable explanations for why people might engage in certain kinds of criminal activity. And the logic around this is that if we are better able to understand the root of the problem, we're better prepared then to work out a solution rather than trying to fix the person. Because often the person who is engaging in criminal behavior is an outcome or manifestation of much deeper lying social problems. So as criminologists, we really encourage students to look at the fabric of society and ask those bigger structural questions. In terms of employment with a criminology degree, many of our students pursue careers with the police. In fact, one of our former students applied for a job with the police and submitted an essay that he did for a course that I was teaching on social movements and protest. And the essay focused on the policing of protest. And in fact, it wasn't all that flattering about the police. He spoke about police brutality, and he thought, well, he's just going to go for it. He's going to submit that as part of his application. And he ended up working as an intelligence analyst with the police. Other criminology graduates have gone on to take up jobs in corrections. So they've got involved in rehabilitation or prison education programs. We've also got students who've paired their criminology degree with papers in social and community work, and they might be drawn to careers in organisations like Community Care Trust or Oranga Tamariki, or doing work that is related to victim support. So as I said in the beginning, criminology as a minor pairs quite well with a major in sociology and also gender studies. I'll deal with sociology first. As student leavers might have done social studies at school. And so if they're interested in social studies, they probably would have an interest in sociology. But what we do at university is quite different from what the school curriculum entails, because we go further than looking at cultural diversity and rights and responsibilities as citizens. We ask some very key questions about power and equality. Who has power? How do they come to have that power? Can the power be challenged or disrupted in any way? We also get into some topics that students find quite awkward. For example, race. It's one of those things none of our students ever wants to talk about because they're terrified if they say anything, it's going to offend somebody. And I'll never forget that. In fact, I'll read it out because there was such a great comment from one of our graduates who said, sociology helped me to understand race so that it wasn't so weird to talk about it. I was always worried that by raising the issue of race, people would think I was racist. So I stayed silent. But now I know that as a society, if we want an anti-racist future, then we need to know how to talk about race. And I think that's such a great thing because I can sort of see students shying away from it and know, like, they sort of do the darting of the eyes. Nobody wants to do direct eye contact. But actually what we develop with sociology is a language that enables you to talk confidently about thorny issues like race. Of course, we don't only look at race. We ask questions about how different aspects of our identities cross-cut one another, such that different people might experience the exact same phenomenon or incident in society in entirely different ways. For instance, if we look at the COVID lockdowns, some people loved lockdown. Some people absolutely hated it. And you kind of go, well, it was the same thing. The same thing for all, the team of 5 million. And so we ask really pressing questions about, a person's life circumstances. Some of us were able to transfer seamlessly into work from our homes. Our homes are set up in a way that enables working from home. So that it has to do with social class, it has to do with employment. Others have casual work, so they weren't able to work and therefore lost money. They lost connections with people. So we ask those kinds of questions. Ultimately, sociology is interested in making the familiar strange. So if we sort of look at our very ordinary everyday behavior, we sort of step outside ourselves and ask questions about, why is it like that? How did we get to this situation? And we piece together the evidence until we can offer an accurate explanation for what is going on around us. In terms of jobs with a sociology degree, I'll start with the skills first. Our students gain cultural competence. They are trained to think critically, systematically, and analytically, and to communicate clearly and effectively, and importantly, with empathy. Many of our sociology graduates end up working for government agencies, ministries in particular. Recently, we had a former sociology graduate who worked as a policy analyst for the child and youth policy team at the Ministry of Social Development. She's currently working as a policy analyst for the Department of Internal Affairs. So again, this idea of the transferable skills is quite important. She started off in one place, and once she had a foot in the door, was able to move across to different ministries, but still doing that work around policy, like analysing policy and writing up research reports. Our graduate skills are also highly sought after in non-governmental organisations. So we've got quite a few students working for the Red Cross, doing work with refugees, different kinds of work. Sometimes it's around housing and accommodation. Other times it's around putting refugees in touch with other support agencies, finding employment, etc. Our graduates have also worked in research consultancies. So there's Litmus up in Wellington that does social and economic research. Also Independent Research Solutions in Christchurch, which is run by the sociologist Jared Gilbert, who some of you might know as the person who talks about gangs. They're currently doing a research project into the radicalisation amongst alt-right communities in New Zealand. So these are just some of these sort of exciting opportunities that a degree in sociology opens up. And then I'll turn to our gender studies program. Otago is one of the only gender studies programs in New Zealand. So this is really quite a draw card for us. Many other universities have slowly gotten rid of their women's studies and gender studies. It's not that they don't teach it, but at Otago, we've got a particular named focus on gender studies. It is a very interdisciplinary qualification. And that's why a lot of our students like it. We regularly have students who have an interest in literature or politics, human geography, philosophy, education, history, enrolling for a major or a minor in gender studies. Now, this might be too soon for some of our school leavers, but we've got a PhD student who's currently looking at tomboyism and how it is represented in literature. Other students have combined their interests in criminology and gender to consider the plight of transgender people in prison. So with those skills, we can consider really topical, critical issues for Aotearoa with the combination of those subjects. In terms of jobs with a gender studies degree, we have had students working for Youthline. So one of our recent graduates was a funding and communications coordinator for Youthline. We've had other students who have in fact created jobs for themselves around their skills. So we had a student, I can't remember exactly what organization she was working for, but she did her gender studies at Otago and basically devised a role for herself in that same company as an equity officer. So just by being there, she could see that the organization was terribly imbalanced in terms of gender equity, and she relied on her skills to make the job for herself. So what you'll find, when students are asking about career advice, is very rarely will an employer be looking for somebody with a sociology or gender studies qualification. The focus will generally be on the skills rather than the name of the qualification. So, once our students are leaving university and they're looking for jobs, they might come across an advert from an NGO looking for a project leader. But then they'll specify that they're looking for somebody who is able to conduct a systematic literature review or undertake empirical research, analyze data, write and communicate clearly and effectively. And these are precisely the skills that young people will acquire if they do a degree with us. So really it's that idea of taking those skills and working them into a job rather than looking out for jobs that are advertising or looking for a degree in sociology, because students will very rarely find that. And I think that's what gives rise to the misconception that there aren't any there aren't any jobs for our graduates. Most of our graduates find employment, but they didn't find it by answering a call for a job that was looking for a sociologist or somebody with gender studies. One thing that I will say that we do exceptionally well at Otago is that we make ourselves available to students. There's many universities where you can study all of these subjects, but over the years, we've had students transferring from universities in the North Island. And something that often comes up is that they like how accessible the lecturers are in our department. So I would say to the school leavers that if they're interested in questions around identity, human relationships, power and social justice, and if they want to be directly supported by the teaching staff in their learning journey, then they should definitely come and study sociology, gender studies and criminology in our department here at the University of Otago.
That was a beautiful way to wrap that up, Marcelle. And before coming to the liaison team, I was working in the colleges, and they were always really grateful for being able to go and drop in and see the sociology teaching staff in particular.
Oh,
so
that's great.
We do have maybe 1 or 2 minutes if there's any burning questions from anyone.
There's nothing in the chat at the moment, but if anyone wants to get their fingers flying, you could pop something in there so that we could either answer it ourselves or pass it over. Should we just move to a break then?
I'll just jump in here, Cheryl, thank you. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Therese Lamb here. I just wanted to say and extend a warm thank you to Marcelle for your lovely talk. It was really good to hear you talk about those options, criminology, sociology, gender studies. I'm sure we can all agree in the schools liaison team, we get lots of students who are interested in these topics. Sometimes the parents do question because they don't know too much about them. And I'm thinking gender studies in particular. But in saying that, I love how you focused on the fact that it's the skills that they gained from these courses and these programs and where they can actually go. There's a whole range of opportunities, not just, just thinking broadly. So NGOs, police, and focusing on that thing that you said about wanting to make this world a better place, focusing on social justice. I think really good points that we will all take away from your talk. So thank you for your time. And I'll just touch on, I believe Shelley Griffiths has probably left us, but also just want to thank her for her time talking about law. That was a nice combination, talking about criminology and law together there, and focusing on our law school being that close-knit community and her line of community and excellence study, as well as thinking about those students who have a curious mind. So so I'll leave it there, and thank you for your time. And I believe we're moving into a break or a Kahoot. Can I just double check?
It's a break.
A break. Okay. So everyone feel free to go have a break, and we'll meet back here around 11:50.
Yep. 11 o'clock on the dot, and we have a surprise and some fun, and then we'll jump into our commerce speakers at 11:15. So see you back here.
Cool. Thank you.